Hi everybody, welcome to Sprague Woodturning. My name is Jim. If you haven't been here before, this is predominantly a turning channel. Where each and every week I show people how to make things on the lathe. This week we're going to be working with some cherry, and well, it's definitely seen better days. This came from one of my roughing out videos years ago, and this is a commission for Don. So we're going to do a commission for him, and we want to use a dark color in this and maybe some hypershift. So we've got to clean this piece of cherry up, get the anchor seal off it. And well, anyway, in the past I've found that a lot of times these really rotten pieces of wood really make really cool castings. So hopefully that's the case for this one. First things first, we got to clean this up and get this anchor seal off. Then we'll go from there. I'd like to personally thank you all for stopping in to watch this week's video, and if you're not aware of it, I do upload every Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I turn my videos into a premiere so that we can use the live chat function and talk about the project as it's being made that week. So, you got to clean. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to, yeah, the thing is just falling apart. I wasn't able to use the full size of this just because of casting bucket sizes. It just didn't fit, so it had to be trimmed down anyway. Ideally it would have been a little larger, but that's all we could do with this piece. But yeah, you can just see the dry rot coming off this thing, and that's a 40 grit flap sander if you're curious what I've got there in the lathe. And then you'll see me eventually switch out to a brass coated brush in order to get deeper down into the inside of the wood. Anyway, this is not uncommon. I've worked with a number of pieces like this. This one here, though, is way up there as far as the rottenness is concerned. But like I said in the opening, a lot of times these really rotten pieces really make fantastic castings. But we'll see. That is a really cool texture. All right, so here's the homemade bucket that we're going to use. And I'm just going to put a bunch of hot melt glue on the bottom of this and drop it into the bucket. As you're going to see here, I kind of struggled to get this in there correctly. Probably gluing it with some CA glue together would have been a better option. Let's try this again. There, I think we got it that time. There, that should hold that. Let's mix up some resin. This week we're going to be using deep casting epoxy from Designer Epoxy. There is a lot of epoxy in this piece, so it certainly is important to use a deep casting epoxy for that. They were looking, or Don was looking for a darker color, so we're going to use the black pearl. He also mentioned like a dark brown, but I thought the black pearl would be a good fit. And of course the hypershift. Gold, green, green, orange, red. Love my hypershift. All right, here's your first 1.5 liters. This is going to take a lot. Yeah, I'd say it's probably going to take 3. I'll be right back. All right, so this one I mixed up a little stronger with black, so 3 quarter teaspoons of black and 1 of the hypershift. This is looking kind of a little too coppery for me. So you can see that this side's a little higher, so I mean we're going to lose this when we mount this between centers. I am going to give it just a little bit more though, because I do want to throw this in the vacuum chamber for a little bit, but I don't know. Actually, I'll probably leave it as it is right now because we're going to have a hard time keeping this from overflowing. Anyway, vacuum chamber coming up next. All right, here we go. You'll see over here, over the course of a few minutes here, how this epoxy really drops off as this piece absorbs the epoxy. I knew this going into it. It does cause some issues later on, but I think that this is the most effective way to do this, and to make sure that, for the most part, any cracks and voids and any rotten grain are filled in. You could call this kind of stabilizing, but it isn't in the true sense of stabilizing. And well, it would have cost a considerable amount of money to stabilize this piece of wood. But I find by using this method with the deep cast, it works actually almost as good. Not there, but pretty close. All right, I've mixed up another 1.5 liters, and that's going to be it. It's not going to get any more than that. We're really pushing our luck with this amount of resin, but that's not a first around here now, is it? Now we're going to have to be really careful or else this is going to overflow. One of the things that I really like about deep cast is the long open time. So it's got a 2-hour open time. So, in the past I've had pieces in here for 1 hour and 45 minutes and still gives you time to get into the pressure pot. Well, that is 25 inches of vacuum. I'm just going to keep doing this for probably about another half hour to 45 minutes. And I'll bring you back when we're ready here. And some people may not know what I mean by open time, but that's essentially the time that you've got before the epoxy starts to set. All right, that's been 45 minutes, so I'm just going to release the vacuum here now. I know the camera might have a hard time picking that up, but the wood is now exposed here. A little bit light here. The light reflects off of the glass and then, you can't really see anything in there. It'd be interesting to see how much this drops off. I do see some floaties in here, so I'm just going to use my sieve. All right, well, that's it. I'm going to throw this into the pressure pot, and fingers crossed we're not going to get any thermal cracking. And I think you're going to be surprised at how much this drops off level-wise. Anyway, see you in 72 hours. Now, what do I do with this? Good morning. Here's what we're looking at. There is a thermal crack here. I don't know if that's going to affect anything. I'm thinking that it's probably going to be okay, though. As long as that's the only one. So I don't know if we're going to do anything with this today, but I want to get it out of here just to make sure that there isn't any thermal cracks down inside of this that we need to repair. It was loose already, but it can't come out. Come on now, come on now. Now there's the thermal crack there. Look at that hypershift sitting on the very bottom. And I'm a little surprised that thermal cracked, but there's a lot of volume here. And I wonder if that goes to the same area. I think we'll have to fix this as we turn this piece because, it's just one here and one here. So I don't really know if these are going to line up. I'm assuming that they're not going to because you got this piece of wood here. So this one on the bottom may just simply get turned away. And this one may not be a factor when it comes to what we're going to do with this. So I'm just going to leave it as it is. All right. I'm going to let this cure one more day. And then we'll come back, get our centers, and get it on the lathe. I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't going to be any issues here, and I don't think that there is going to be. So, see you tomorrow. I know I've showed this method a number of times, but I've got all these templates that I use for my buckets, and I like to use one that's smaller than the actual piece I'm working on. That way you can have a look around the outside of it, because a lot of times these things aren't exactly round, especially if there's a homemade bucket that I've made. That's for sure. That's probably about as good as we're going to get. So one of the things to take note of here is the fact that the resin has completely dropped off for as long, as much as it has. That was in the vacuum chamber for a substantial amount of time, and I'm still always kind of amazed when I open up the pressure pot and see how much further the epoxy has dropped off. I should mention that I'm just using the Ellsworth gouge here just to clean up all those wood that's on the very top of this before switching out to the Hercules. A lot of times if I'm just dealing with straight wood pieces, I'll always use the bowl gouge from David Ellsworth. But of course, as everybody knows, it's been around for a while, switching to the Hercules has really been a game changer as far as working with wood and epoxy pieces are concerned. You've probably seen a glimpse of the thermal cracking that's below the surface. And so, yeah, there is a ton of thermal cracking that we're going to have to fix here. Again, a lot of volume. It was an overpour. I didn't measure this, but it's probably a good solid, I'd say 5 inches. So 4 inches is the max, but is the max with deep cast. But of course, you've seen me push it a lot further than that on this channel, that's for sure. But every now and then you're going to get burned, and that happened with this piece. In the end, I really like the look of this piece, so it doesn't really take away from it. And but we will be using kind of the kintsugi method of repair for this coming up here in the future, because we really have no choice. So there's our first real look at this, and yeah, there's a lot of thermal cracking. I mean, there's some cracking in the wood, which of course was there beforehand, but yeah, there's going to be some fixes here. The one thing that really kind of surprised me about this is how black this is. Now, of course, I used black pearl, I get that, but I thought with the hypershift that it would lighten it up a little more than it had. So that was one thing that I was a little surprised by. Mixing the black pearl a little lighter may certainly help with that. Anybody that's been around for a while again will know that I really like contrasting colors. So I'm not going to put a cherry colored resin in with a cherry piece. I mean, that's just not me. I really enjoy contrasting colors and strong, bold colors against neutral backgrounds. That's who I am in a nutshell when it comes to casting epoxy pieces anyway. I should also mention that we are using the number 3 Hercules from Hunter Tool Systems, and there's a link in the description. Get 10% off your next order. I think Mike Hunter is actually putting together kind of a starter epoxy tool set. So I have yet to hear back from him. I was hoping to hear back from him beforehand, before I started doing the voiceover, but I think that you might see that in the future. So hopefully he does, and then that way you can go there and you can get kind of the tools that you see me use here in the workshop pretty much every week. So that would be great. And I will say that, once I switched to the Hunter carbide tools as far as working with resin and, epoxy pieces, it has really, it's turned my turning experience into a more positive one. I hate sharpening, and when you're using just a straight up gouge when it comes to working with these pieces, you have to do a lot of sharpening. Yeah, there's more thermal cracking. There's a lot in this. I was really kind of taken back for it. I didn't think that there would be as much as there is, but anyway, it's not the first time that we've certainly had to deal with that. So anyway, I've just reversed this because this is going to be the bottom. I didn't really turn that strong of a tenon on the very top, but I'm using dovetail jaws to hold this, so it's being held fairly securely. You'll see me pull away the tailstock here and clean this up. But yeah, I mean, between the wood and the thermal cracking, there certainly was no shortage of cracks in this. But, you know, to be perfectly honest with you, I enjoy challenge. And I really like working with substandard wood like this. It's amazing sometimes to me that the difference between putting some rotten old pieces of wood together and some epoxy, some of the results are just absolutely fantastic. So that is a birch waste block that I'm gluing on the very bottom here. And again, just back with the Ellsworth gouge to clean this up, get the tenon set. My jaw set that I'm using for my stronghold is a 1/2 inch deep. So you want your tenon to be less than that. That way the tenon, the bottom of the tenon, isn't bottoming out in the jaws. You do not want that to happen. You want the top of the jaws to be resting on the bottom of the casting, and that way you won't have as much vibration when it comes to turning it. So we're going to reverse this piece, and again, I like to use these waste block tenons because if you don't, you're going to be taking size off of your piece. So last week I told you that we had an accepted offer on our home, and if you're not familiar, my wife and I are going to be moving to the eastern part of Canada, our home province of New Brunswick, and we were selling our house here in eastern Ontario. And this week all the conditions were met by the buyer, so we are officially sold. It's a done deal. We've had movers in and getting estimates, and there's a bunch of stuff that my wife and I have both been dealing with. But anyway, there's a really cool close-up of the Hercules in action. Really, really like the profile of this tool, the tilted down forward in the tool helps with getting catches, and essentially you can use this tool exactly like a bowl gouge. There are very, very few differences between the use of the Hercules and a normal gouge. And for the most part, that goes with the Phoenix too and the Osprey. They're all very similar in that regard. Anyway, back to the house. Yes, we're sold. Talking to my builder, he says he plans on starting my workshop in a month. So our closing date here is going to be the 22nd of October. And we're going to get loaded here on the 21st. And I won't be down there if things go to plan to get the foundation in. But hopefully we'll be there for the rest of it. And yeah, there's our thermal cracking again. All right, well, we got some cracks to repair, and there's quite a few of them. So I think what I'm going to do is try my old bag method here, see how we make out. There's just, to try and dam this off and do something here, it's not going to work. This side is beautiful. Not a thing wrong with it. But yeah. And I'm still a little baffled as to why this has happened. It wasn't a huge pour. I mean, it's deeper than it probably should have been, but anyway, we'll fix it and make it even look cooler. Anyway, what I've got is a couple of kitchen bags here. I've doubled them up. I really don't want any resin to get down into this area, but experience has taught me that may be an impossible thing to not have happen. But we'll do our best to try and stop it from happening. And what I'm going to do is use this plastic bowl. I'm going to throw a little bit of rice down in here. So hopefully that rice will push up on the bottom of that bag, and it'll take up some of the space that we've got in here. I'm going to try and put some rice around the side of this too. For this pour, we're going to be using art cast, and the great thing about that is we'll be able to carry on with this the next day. So that's one of the things I really like about art cast. Could have possibly gotten away with using the Pro Series, but I thought it was probably best to stick with art cast. And of course, the mixing paddle that you see me using, you can get that at Designer Epoxy as well. And we're going to use the same Hypershift. And the reason why I want to use this is because I wanted there to be some veining in this, but I didn't want it to be like in your face veining, if you follow. All right, we got 800, is it 800? No, 600 milliliters. This is the bad area. I definitely want to try and get all of this, but you know, it's important for me to get this down in here, so that might be a bit of an adventure, but we'll see. A lot of people might be wondering why the thermal cracking happened in this area and not in the other parts, and that's because that's where the majority of the volume of the epoxy was. There, while that's settling out, I'm going to get the vacuum chamber out and we'll get it in there, and then we'll top it up, and then hopefully that will pull all that epoxy down in there and fill in all the holes. All right, let's give this a try and see what happens here. I'm a little worried about that bag falling down over there, but we'll see. So I got this vacuum chamber off of Amazon, and it came with a vacuum pump that had oil in it. And I have since stopped using the pump because it's just spewing oil like crazy. So, you know, it was a cheap vacuum pump, and, you know, you kind of get what you pay for. So I'm using the vacuum pump for my vacuum shucking system. I do love this vacuum chamber, though. It's one of the better. I have two vacuum chambers, and I like this one a lot better than my much larger one than this. All right, I'm going to take this, throw it in the pressure pot. We'll see you in there tomorrow. Well, good morning. I don't know if this has been successful or not. It's hard to tell right at this stage. Yeah. I've been asked a few times why I use the rice method instead of, say, marbles or some other material like sand. And that's because if you get a leak, then you can turn the rice away. You won't be able to do that with sand or anything else. Must say I'm glad to see that. Yeah, perfect. So that's one thing. But did I waste my time trying to fill this in is the main question. Yeah, well, there's where all of our thermal cracking was, so it looks like it's done its job. Be interesting to see if I can get this back in and get it running relatively true. I might try and grind down any of this resin here. I don't know, I might try without it. Anyway, let's find out. That's not going to work. We're going to have to clean this off a bit. So this is a multi-tool. That's what Milwaukee calls it. Well, I think that's what everybody calls it. And I bought this for renovations, actually. And never thought that I ever would use it for something like this, but it actually worked fantastic. And I'll be using it in the future if I need to, you know, move away some material that's, you know, that's got fairly tight tolerances like this. It actually worked fantastic. That should be better. Much gooder. Should have been an English teacher. If you don't take these pieces off, when they come off, these sharp edges can cut you wide open. So as you watch me true this up, I'll briefly talk about last week's project, and if you missed that, I will link it at the end of this video. But essentially I made kind of a closed vase out of sumac branches, staghorn sumac branches, red sumac, if you will. And I thank you so much for those that have watched it. The video was done fantastic. It actually turned out even better than I thought it would. I really, when I used the black, I wasn't too sure about it, but in the end, it was the right decision. So anyway, it was called Simply Elegant. And if you missed that last week, I'll link it at the end of this video. I do highly recommend checking it out. It's a really good video, and I really like the look of it, and so do a lot of other people. Only a few people really didn't care for it. That's fine. We're not going to... You can't please everybody all the time. That is for sure. But anyway, it was a really stark contrast. As I said earlier, this is what I like. And I really like the piece. Well, I don't know about you, but I thought that would shine through a lot better than it has. I think the problem is it's so dark behind the hypershift that we put in that it's actually showing through it. That may change when we polish it, but yeah, I mean, that there, you can see little hints of it maybe down there. For the most part, they've all been filled in. Just a couple of spots here that I think will be very easy to repair, no big deal. I think I'll take a little bit more off of here just to see, make sure that we've got all of the standing resin that's been sitting on the surface off. But anyway, it's a good solid casting, and that's the important thing. But it is definitely heavy on one side. Since this piece is so out of balance, I believe 450 RPM was the highest I could go at this stage. I was able to increase the speed later on, but at this stage 450 was the max. And my lathe is actually bolted to the floor. And when I get pieces on the lathe like this, when I turn up the speed, sometimes the whole floor will vibrate. So the way I typically do it is I mount the pieces between center, dial up the speed, back the speed off until the vibration stops or close to being eliminated. And then that's your turning speed from there. But of course, when things get thinned out and lighten up, then of course you can pick up the speed as you go. All right, we're all set up and ready for coring. This is the one-way coring system from oneway.ca. I screwed up before I put in my steady rest. The banjo should be up against the headstock. I've accounted for it. We should be good. I've got my number 1 knife set in, and that's going to take out the center core. And then, of course, we'll switch out to the number 2 knife set and take out this core. And then, of course, the mother bowl will be left behind. And, of course, we're going to be using the Core Pro cutter from Hunter Tool Systems. Absolutely love this for coring. Let's see how we make out here. This should be, fingers crossed, relatively easy. But we've been here before, haven't we? So again, if you've been around for a while, you know that any chance that I can get to core these pieces, I certainly will. I just really don't see the point in having this go to shavings on the floor when you can, relatively quite quickly pay for your your coring rig by using this method. So I do highly recommend getting one. Yeah, you know, it's a fair bit of money, but really you can probably get away with the #1 knife set and the #2 knife set. The #3 and the #4, which I also have, are for larger works, but you typically don't see that size when it comes to resin casting, that's for sure. There's a small little something that in the future we'll be able to make something with, whatever it's going to be. Chuck it in with another casting, whatever. So anyway, this is the #2 knife set. And the one thing that I really like about this system from One Way is a great system. But the cutters that come with the system from One Way, I just absolutely despise. They're hard to sharpen and sharpen correctly. They're actually fairly hard to sharpen just because of the way their geometry is. So when somebody suggested, hey, like, have you tried this cutter from Hunter Tool Systems? I said, no, I want to get one to try it. And I'm telling you, like, it is night and day. Absolutely love the Corporal cutter. Yeah, there's some sticker shock, and there's some sticker shock when it comes to your coring rig. But as I've covered in previous videos, it's not going to take long to get that money back. And then, you're in the black and you're actually making money. So it really is worth your while to do that. I should also mention that I've got a little tailstock extender in from John Tully as well, and another tailstock extender. And in order to reach this, that's another thing about turning smaller stuff like this. Sometimes it's really hard to hold it on the lathe, and you need to be creative sometimes. And there is the core, and as you can see, we're going to have some more thermal cracking to fill. That's the going theme here today, filling thermal cracks. So this is the way that I like to flatten these pieces. I just actually ground off the little knob that was sticking on the bottom. That way you've got a flat surface for the live center to sit on. And this is the easiest way to flat bottom these so that you can actually get a glue block on them. That's the Phoenix, getting in there nice and tight next to the live center. Now this is my solution to hold this in place, and I'm just going to use a couple of pieces of duct tape, and that will allow me to take the live center away and then just grind off that little nub with some 60 grit, and then we'll be able to get a glue block on the bottom of this. And I was actually quite pleased with the way this worked. I definitely would not have touched the Hercules to this when it was spinning, but just to grind it off, it was perfectly fine. So before I move this outboard, we're just going to clean this up, get rid of, a lot of this glue, and maybe true this up a little bit with the Phoenix. And that way, it's running a lot truer when I move this outboard because of my left-handedness. All right, well, I wish that these thermal cracks had been filled in better than they have been, but there's still some pretty substantial ones. Now, this is far enough down that I might be able to turn this away, but if I don't do this method, then it'll be a thing, because that's just the way it goes. I might just take some thin CA glue and throw it down in these finer cracks. But for these bigger ones, we're going to go with the UV resin again from Designer Epoxy. And I'm just going to slightly tint it with the black pearl and a Dixie cup. Need to go easy on the color here because of course that UV light needs to penetrate through this in order to cure it. And if it's too strong, you may not be able to do that. I don't know if that's going to be enough or not. And if you haven't seen this before, it is cured with a UV light, and that's what that is. Anyway, there's a few on this one, and of course there's a few on this one that needs to be filled as well. And anyway, I'll bring you back when we're ready to turn these on the outboard end of the lathe. So even though we've changed chocks, this thing's running relatively true. And like I said, I did use some CA glue in parts of this casting and the smaller core. You'll see me here every now and then hit it with some accelerator to cure some of the the CA glue that had come out. There was no issues curing the resin, the UV resin, but you know, I did leave that UV light on there for a good solid 5, 7, 10 minutes. I had some other stuff on the go, so I would just leave it there. So the longer that is sitting there curing that UV resin, the more likelihood you're not going to have any issues. So, you know, usually a couple of minutes will do it, but if it's tinted dark, then you should leave it for a lot longer. So yeah, there you go. I mean, that's a considerable improvement over the last time we filled. Yeah, I was thinking that was uncured resin, but it actually wasn't. And anyway, when it comes to this kind of stuff, you are going to do multiple fillings to try and get all of these little thermal cracks and rotten areas filled in. So one thing that I'd like to talk about is I'm getting a lot of emails, questions about what tools, like, you know, this is from new wood turners, and you know, I'm absolutely, you know, I'm really happy that people will look at me as a mentor and say, you know, what tool should I buy and what should I do to get going in this expensive hobby? Because it is a hobby for the majority of people. I've turned mine into a full-time business since 2012. But you know, the very first thing that you should do is do a Google search in your local area and see if there's any wood turning clubs in your area. There will be a wealth. You can go to meetings and you can see things up close and personal. A lot of these clubs will have multiple different lathes, so you can try out a lathe to see exactly what you like in a lathe, or you know, basically what you can afford, because you know that is a thing for sure. Lathes and a big industrial lathe like you're looking at mine, I would say to buy a new one with all the bells and whistles, $10,000 to $12,000. And of course, that's including outboard turning rigs and, you know, all the accessories that are going to go with your lathe. So, you know, it's a major purchase. Finding one secondhand, lathes typically hold their value fairly well. But the thing is, you really need to make sure that it really appeals to you before you decide to drop that kind of coin on a lathe. And so a lot of times some of the members will have lathes for sale, that they're not using anymore. The other good thing is there'll be a variety of tools there that you can try, and you can see what appeals to you the most. And of course, getting advice from members is a big thing. And I know that, you know, wood turning clubs are, you know, we're usually a pretty friendly bunch. So, you know, you might even be able to get invited over to somebody's shop that has a one-way or has a Robuster or has a Powermatic, like whatever. And then from there, you can make a decision, an educated decision on what you want to do and how serious you want to get into this. I would say that my current setup is probably about $25,000 just for my wood turning equipment and nothing else. So it's not cheap. And that's not including the structure. That's a lathe, that's a big bandsaw, all the associated tooling. You know, there's you can spend a lot of money, and I mean, the way things are right now, everything seems to be high. Everything's almost doubled in price. It's crazy. So just showing a little bit of shear scraping. I thought I would zoom out and kind of show you the position of the gouge. I know that I've shown it kind of up close before, but I thought that I would show that. And switch back to the Hercules on the inside of the bowl. I don't think I use the Ellsworth gouge on the inside of the bowl at all. So hopefully that helps. I know that there's a lot more to it than that. And when I say tool sets, like high-speed steel tool sets, I'm looking at one now that's got 7 tools in it, and I would use 2 of them. And that's why I'm saying buy the tools as you need them. That's fine. If you plan on doing a lot of center work, spindle work, then yeah, you can probably buy a tool set like that. But, you know, from a bowl maker standpoint, you know, 5/8 bowl gouge and parting tool, that's all you need. But, you know, I find this is a very, very rewarding occupation that I have, and I absolutely love what I do. And I know that there's a lot of people who really love wood turning as well. So there are the 3.5-inch double disc. We're finally on to sanding after multiple fillings off camera. So we're going to sand from 60 to 180, and then of course we're going to do a resin coat on these pieces like I ordinarily have been doing. Because at this stage, there still is some other pieces that still need to be filled again. So anyway, once this is done, this one will be sanded the same way, and then we'll be able to move on to an epoxy coat. All right, what I have here is 3 ounces of the Pro Series and a silicone barbecue brush. Again, this will be mostly directed at the new people. The reason why I'm using epoxy coat here is to fill in any little voids that there might be in the resin and the wood. And then that way we'll have a solid surface to work from when we put the Waterlux on the next day. Well, there you go. What do you think of that? Awesome. I tell you though, it has been a bit of a chore getting here. Lots of fillings. It hasn't been easy. But everything looks like it's filled in, so that's good. Lots of resin staining in this too. Let me know in the comments what you think. Very, very dark. Right, core coming up. And there's the core. You know, it's nothing spectacular, but it would have gone to shavings if we didn't save it. It's a pretty nice resin coming through there. I do like this veining up in here. Get the light to hit that right so you can see it. There, that's probably it. Right, well, we'll see you tomorrow for the first coat of Waterlux. All right, well, it is the next day, and I thought I would show you this before I start sanding. Only a couple of dry spots on this. You can't really see that hypershift coming through. But, yeah, surprised at the lack of bubbles. There's the odd one here and there, but for the most part, I think we're going to be good to go from here on. So there's that one. Of course, here's the mother bowl. And again, surprisingly enough, there's not a ton of bubbles in here. There's a few, yes. Not sure about this area right here. Might have to do some more filling there, I'm not sure. But I think what I'm going to do with this one is just give it a very, very light trimming on the inside, because the epoxy is quite heavy down on the base here. It's going to be probably pretty hard for you to see that. There, see it? So it's going to take a bit of sanding to sand that out. Dry spot back here. You can see it there. But yeah, you can really see the hypershift in that one. See it? Yeah. Especially right there. Anyway, we're going to start sanding. Well, I'm going to trim this one, but the other one I think I'll start sanding at 180 and go all the way to 800. And anyway, I'll take you along. Now, some people might find this counterproductive, but, you know, my only response to that is that, you know, this really does help fill in those areas, and it will give you a better surface prior to putting on any of the other finishes. So anyway, when that's done, we're just going to buff it with the triple E buffing compound and of course clean it with the denatured alcohol. And then like I said earlier, we're going to have to trim this piece. It would have taken a really long time to sand back all this epoxy, so I figured that it was probably best to do this before we started sanding. That way we're not using a ton of sandpaper to do so. So after trimming this piece, I actually started sanding at 120 and then went all the way to 800. I don't see any point in going any higher than that. That is a great surface for any finish that you're going to put over top of it. And it was buffed and cleaned with the denatured alcohol as well. Ew. All right, here is your first coat of Waterlux Gloss. Well, there you go. First coat of Waterlux. Hypershift coming through. I can see that parts of this cherry on the end grain here, they're already starting to dry up. So even though we've got all that epoxy in here, it's still going to take probably 3 coats. So looking at it, I'm looking in the camera now, and it almost looks jet black in the camera, but when you're looking at it like this, you can see all kinds of different colors. Where the thermal cracks were, you can actually see that hypershift in there, but you can't really pick it up that much. There, you might be able to see it there. Right up in this area right here. See it there? Hard to show. There's your shifting colors. Cool. I like it. Core coming up next. And there's the core. Nothing super spectacular about it, but you know, it's just a bonus. And pieces like this help pay for your corn rig. But I don't know if you can see that hypershift in there or not. Again, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing all kinds of different color variation this way. But when I show it to the camera, it just doesn't seem to... Oh, there we go. That's a little better. It's in there. You can see the veining where it was filled in by just the hypershift. Nice little core. So after 3 coats of finish, we are finally ready to part the small core from the waste block. And of course, I'm using the 3/16 inch parting tool for crown. Usually it comes off with a smack. All right, well, that's going to do it for the video as you watch me finish the bottoms on these 2 bowls. Thank you all for being here today, and special shout out to the members. Thank you so much for your support. Let's have a last chat about this week's project. Well, let's have a last little look at these bowls. I know it's so shiny. It's really, really hard to take any video of. I will light these up at the end, but you know, there's only a couple spots where we're going to be able to see through here. Overall, you know, I really like the look of this. Yeah, you know, the black could be a little lighter, but like I said, I like contrasting colors. Size on this is 7 1/4 across and 2 1/4 inches tall. And you know, it's my typical 1/2 inch thickness, thereabouts. Here is the very bottom. And as per normal, there is no finish because, well, it's Thursday and I'm out of time. So that's the core. And here's the mama bowl, the mother bowl. And again, I really, really like the look of this. Cherry is the queen of hardwoods. Of course, walnut is the king. 3 coats of Waterlux. Super, super shiny. And this actually took a really, really good finish. It's almost like glass. And again, the two-tone there just looks absolutely awesome. I love it. Hyper shift. I don't know if it's going to show up here or not. Might be able to see it in the rotating footage at the end. And there definitely will be able to light this up and see through it. Same thing with the small core. Here's the very bottom. Same deal as the other one. If I tried to sign on the very bottom here, you never would have seen it. Size on this one is 10 inches across and 3 3/4 inches tall. And it's about the same, 1/2 inch in thickness. Anyway, I really like these, and hopefully Don does as well. Set this down. Don't forget to put designer epoxy in the comments down below to be entered into the next giveaway at 135,000 when we get there. And of course, it's only open to continental USA and Canada. Sorry, the rest of the world, we can't accommodate you at the time. And of course, if you use my code with designer epoxy, you're going to get 10 free color bags, 10% off your order, and free shipping within continental USA and Canada. So that is a fantastic deal. And again, all my other sponsors are down in the description. So if you need some stuff, head on down there and put some money back in your pocket. Next week, well, what am I going to say about this one? Next week, we're going to be going to sewing class. I'll leave it at that. Well, that's it. Take care. Stay safe. Don't forget the bell. Please share my videos with your friends. That is the largest way for me to build my presence here on YouTube. I would really appreciate it. And hey, if you haven't subscribed, do that. After all, it doesn't cost you anything. And don't forget that bell notification. Have a great weekend. See you next week.